What's up, everybody? Izzy again, back with episode 53 here. Today was push, which means chest, shoulders, and triceps. Let's get on to the first question of the day.
Just the two of us, building castles in the sky.
How often do you smoke the Zaza? Never. I actually don't smoke anything pretty much ever. But I do like edibles, and I don't keep them on hand unless I'm having sleep issues related to dieting, because I'll pretty much just use one every off day if I have them around. So I'm the type of personality that likes drugs. I have an addictive personality, and I like drugs, like all of them. So I have a very good deal of control and discipline over that. But for me, like, if it's not in the house, then I don't have the opportunity to use it or overuse it. So that's how it goes for me. It's a every so often kind of recreation. Tips for less stress, better recovery, and better sleep for students. Yeah, man, grow up. I don't mean that in a condescending way, but like you're out of the house now. I'm assuming we're talking about college here. You're not with mommy and daddy anymore. Nobody's forcing you to get up on time and to go to bed on time. You have to do that to yourself. You have to create a schedule and enforce it. Stop procrastinating. Don't wait until the last second to study for an exam. Don't pull all-nighters. Don't wait till your homework is 2 hours before the deadline before you start working on it. Set yourself a schedule, commit to that schedule, and actually stick to it so that you can have a consistent time that you go to bed and a consistent time that you wake up. Be an adult. Have some routine. That's what I would suggest. Where do you get your calcium from? The two primary sources of calcium for me are yogurt, Greek yogurt, zero-fat Greek yogurt, and leafy greens. So leafy greens have an load of calcium. It's not the most absorbable format, but it is where I get the bulk of my calcium. Additionally, I will have salmon once a day, and even though I get my salmon filleted, there are still tiny little bones that end up in there. And believe it or not, bones are an incredibly rich source of calcium, so that also adds to the total for me. If you're going to supplement, use eggshell calcium. What is the minimum amount of time that it makes sense to bulk for? I need to stay within water cutting distance of my weight class. So the question you're asking and the question you want an answer to are actually two different questions. As I covered yesterday in the nutritional periodization for powerlifting question, if you are a weight class athlete, you are not going to do traditional bulks unless one of two things. One, you're a total beginner who's super far away from your ideal weight class, or two, you and your coach have identified that you need to move up a weight class to be more competitive, in which case, if you're gonna move up a full weight class, you need to block off like 16 to 20 weeks to move up a weight class, where you're just gonna have a 5-month off season and not even think about competing during that whole time. If you are actively competing right now and you're already in the right weight class, you're gonna use more of a main gaining approach or a surplus bias maintenance where you only gain 1 to 2 pounds a month. Why are front squats so underrated? They have a really good SFR. They have a longer range of motion than other squats, and it's less joint distress on your elbows and shoulders. Well, because almost none of that is true, man. That's the problem. Front squats are generally not limited by the quads. Most people do not have the mobility to get into a front rack, and most people do not have the ankle mobility to descend fully upright in a front squat position. Second, front squats do not have a longer range of motion than a high bar squat. And two, they actually have a shorter moment arm between the quads and the bar because you move the bar to the front of your body. So that brings it closer to your knees, less torque on the knees. It does, however, make the moment arm longer on the thoracic extensors, and that's the big problem with front squats, is that most people's front squat is not limited by quads. It's limited by the thoracic extensors, it's limited by abs, it's limited by mobility, it's even limited sometimes by the bar literally choking people out because it rests on your carotid artery. I rarely program front squats. I took a year off from the gym. Should I do daily undulating periodization or a novice linear progression? You should do a novice linear progression. The shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. There's no reason for you to do something that complicated right off of the bat. The fastest way that you're going to get back to your previous numbers is just a straight up linear progression. So that's 100% what you should go with. I even do that when I'm doing like a comeback from an injury, even now when I don't take a year-long break from the gym. Second question here. Is there any way to hack the Smith hooks and keep them from moving? Yes, the way that you do that is you can just band them. So wrap a band around the upright and the hook. I'll put a picture of this. Or you can use like a little bungee cord type thing, and that will keep it from moving. Keep in mind, if you do this, you'll have to unrack from the bottom. Is power building a viable approach? This really just depends what you mean. Are you going to build strength and muscle mass doing power building? Yes. But here's how it's going to work. You're going to be weaker than a pure power lifter and stronger than a pure bodybuilder. You're going to be bigger than a pure power lifter and smaller than a pure bodybuilder. You're going to sacrifice off your top end strength and your top end muscularity to fall somewhere in the middle. Now, the bigger issue, if we're talking about powerlifting, is in the actual execution, because a lot of times what people mean by power building is they mean I'm going to go in and I'm going to do 1 to 3 rep maxes on squat, bench, and deadlift, and then I'm going to go do a bunch of bodybuilding accessories after that, and that's going to be my method. That method kind of sucks ass. Okay, it will work, but it would be better to actually periodize and do 8-week blocks of hypertrophy and 8-week blocks of strength. If you are skinny fat, should you cut or bulk? I mean, the rest of the question is kind of like getting into the nuance of how to do that, but it really just doesn't matter. You guys get so caught up on the skinny fat thing for beginners. Like, this is a very short phase that you're going to go through, like a couple years at most. And you're like, a couple years? That's not short. Yes, it is. If you want to be any good at this shit, prepare to block off the next 10 to 20 years of that for dedication purposes, okay? So if you have a high body fat percentage, even if you have no muscle mass at all, you should diet, because it sets you up to have a better, more successful, longer surplus period. So if you're like 16, 17, 18% body fat, why would you bulk from there and look even worse? Instead of being skinny fat, you're just going to be chubby. So diet down to leanness, and at least you'll be lean, and then bulk from there. As a beginner, is a max recoverable volume level of 3 sets per week for biceps normal? No. So I can almost guarantee, like with close to 100% certainty, because you're training back 4 times a week, something about your back training is interfering with your bicep recovery in that particular session, and it's acting as sort of like a red herring or a false flag, making you think that you're at your bicep MRV, when in reality you just have a fatigue management issue with the way that your split is structured. There's no way that you can only recover from 3 sets of biceps once per week. Like, are you doing that and then getting super sore for a full week, and then the soreness doesn't dissipate until your next bicep session a full week later? I really doubt it. So very low likelihood. When should somebody start using HGH on top of PEDs? Well, I'm assuming you mean AAS, anabolic androgenic steroids, because GH is a PED. The only reason that people don't do GH right out of the bat is because it used to be really expensive and people couldn't afford it. In my opinion, there's no reason to not start off using HGH. If you use intelligent polypharmacy practices, you won't have to use as many androgens. You won't have to use as many steroids. GH greatly lowers the doses that you need to basically get the exact same results in terms of recovery, muscle growth, etc. So, in my opinion, that's something that you should be doing right off the bat. Question number 2. A couple weeks ago, you mentioned that if you were in the market for a new belt, you wouldn't get the SBD belt. Which belt would you get? I would get the Pioneer Fit Strongman belt. It's a soft belt and 8 inches wide. Great option for hypertrophy. Do you think beginners should start at the absolute minimum volume? No. When you're a beginner, the only thing that matters is technical development. And by that, I mean learning how to do movements with the correct technique. So you're going to prioritize actually a fairly decent volume of sets with medium reps. So ideally sets of like 5 to 6 reps for 3 to 5 sets. And here's the difference with this type of training for a beginner versus anybody else. When you're a beginner, your sets don't have to be anywhere near failure to cause positive adaptations. I'm talking you can be 10 plus reps away from failure and still get improvements in neural efficiency, hypertrophy, and technique. The only focus for a beginner should be learning technique. Thoughts on fat grips? Have you used them? Do you like them? Do you think they're good for hypertrophy? Well, if you watch any of my videos, you'll see that I use them on dips. Otherwise, I think it's pretty much a useless thing to have. It makes any curl variation into a forearm variation instead of being good for training biceps. And for pressing movements, it's going to reduce force output, because anytime that you can't grip and squeeze the implement, you get less force output. So the only exception to that, and the only time that I use them, is on movements that have handles which are not ergonomic if skinny, and dip machines are one good example of that. My elbows feel a lot better with a thicker handle, so that's the only time I use them. Should a natural worry about osteogenics? microplastics, using the microwave, etc. Dude, I just don't give a shit about this kind of thing. I gotta be honest. Like, to me, this is like hippie conspiracy theory nonsense with limited to zero backing in any sort of clinical setting and any sort of objective research. And I'm just not that guy. Like, I'm just not the conspiracy guy. Yes, some conspiracies end up being true. And some like hippie nonsense stuff ends up being completely true. And I get on board once it's proven true. Not any time before. Once it's proven true, then I go, okay, there's research on this now, fine. To me, it's like not an experimentation grounds for me, so I don't worry about this at all, and I wouldn't if I was natural. Can SARMs build as much muscle as orals? Some say yes, with less side effects. Dude, who says yes to that? Like the people that want to sell you SARMs because you're afraid of needles? Probably, because that's SARMs have more side effects for less results than real steroids, which is why no real bodybuilders f with them or even worry about them whatsoever. The reason really why people get less side effects with SARMs than with real anabolics, with real androgenic steroids, is because they take them in piddling little doses compared to what you would use if you were actually using androgenic anabolic steroids. When you take SARMs in equivalent doses to orals, less gains, more side effects, not less, more. Should I wear a belt on pendulum squat, hack squats, and RDLs? So I've gone over this count times in the Q&A, like I don't even know how many times. But with very, very few exceptions, a belt is never a negative for hypertrophy. Wearing a belt never makes the stimulus to the target muscle worse. Now, here are the exceptions. One is if you are wearing a super thick powerlifting style belt and it's interfering with your ability to breathe on high rep sets. So there's 3 lifts that you've listed here that could all potentially suffer from that, which is the RDL, the pendulum, and the hack. All 3 of those you could potentially be doing for, I don't know, a set of 15 and have a belt interfere with your breathing. It's rare, but it can definitely happen. The biggest exception that happens to a lot of people is that a thick 4-inch powerlifting style leather belt will make it so that you automatically round your back. It'll force you into a bad spinal position. And in that case, don't wear your belt for hinges if it does that. This question is essentially asking me to explain the differences between double progression, simultaneous double progression, and dynamic double progression. So traditional double progression is where you will use a set and rep scheme, let's just say 3 sets of 8 to 12, right? And you're using the same weight across all 3 sets. When you get 12 reps on all 3 sets, then you move up in weight. Dynamic double progression is where each set acts as its own progress track. So for example, for set 1, you're using a given weight, and when you can get 12 reps on set 1, you move up the weight for set 1. If on set 2 you only get 11 reps, you don't move up the weight for set 2, and so on and so forth for set 3. So each set progresses separately. Simultaneous double progression is where you add a micro load, 1% of the weight that you used last time, and you still try to add reps. So you simultaneously progress reps and load. You can use a simultaneous double progression with normal double progression or dynamic. Can you use a sample load progression using simultaneous double progression? Sure. So like I said, you can use simultaneous double progression with any form of double progression. So if you're going to do top set back off, let's say I'm doing Smith incline and my top set is going to be 315 pounds for a set of 5 to 10. Let's say I get 6 reps. That means next week I'm going to add 1%, which is 3 pounds. I'm going to round that to the nearest convenient increment. So next week I will do 317 and a half pounds for my top set, and I'll try to get 6 reps or better. If I'm feeling really strong, maybe I'll get that 1% jump and a rep. Now, on my back off, let's say I'm doing 225 for 10 to 15 reps. Let's say I get 225 for 15 reps. So instead of taking my standard 1% jump, I'm going to bust out my E1RM calculator and try to figure out what number I need to hit next time to get 10 reps so that I'm starting that progression over again. If you're doing this for straight sets, which you easily can do that as well, you'll add 1% to all sets until you've maxed out the rep range on all sets. Any ideas on how to make a do-it-yourself seatbelt for leg curls, leg extensions, and dip machines and things of that nature? Yes. So I think a ratchet strap is what you're going to want to look for here. That should be all you need to get a working model going. This isn't exactly my area of expertise. So if there was someone who I would ask for help to kind of put perfect this idea and actually make it actionable in the real world, it would be Zachary. So if he has time, maybe he'll give you some ideas on how you could do this. When rehabbing a pec injury, do you do lower weight, higher reps? So when I'm rehabbing a pec injury, I try to keep my training as similar to how it normally is as possible. So if I can do a full range of motion without pain, that's what I do. If I can do my normal loads without pain, that's what I do. Usually one of those two things is compromised though, so I'll have to either use less range of motion or lighter loads. Over time though, I want to work my way back up to normal as fast as possible. If I'm struggling to eat enough food on a massing phase, can a light day of eating help reset my appetite? Well, here's the thing. It's not going to do enough to physiologically reset your appetite in any meaningful way. Biology just doesn't tend to operate on timescales that short. And in much the same way that cheat meals don't make any long-term physiological changes in terms of upregulating the thyroid or leptin levels or decreasing hunger, a light day of eating isn't going to do that either. However, it may give you a psychological break and give you something to look forward to, which may increase your adherence if you're having trouble actually sticking to your diet. However, just like unrestricted cheat meals on a diet can go off the rails with people basically turning it into an all-you-can-eat contest that sets them back a full week or more of dieting progress, I could easily see somebody with a light appetite under-eating so much on a light day that they lose a significant amount of weight and really shoot themselves in the foot. If you need to reset your appetite, a mini cut is your best bet. Should I place deadlifts on pull days or squat days? So first of all, let me say that any split can work. There is no right way and wrong way to do a split. However, the fatigue management aspect of putting RDLs and deadlifts on your pull day has never made a lot of sense to me. And here's why. No matter what deadlift variation that you do, it's always going to heavily tax the lower back, the glutes, and the hamstrings. Whether that's a conventional deadlift, a stiff leg, or an RDL, it doesn't matter. It just changes the bias of those muscles a little bit, but all those muscles still get heavily taxed. So if your lower back is fatigued and you're going to try and do legs the next day, now free weight squats are off the table. And even if you pick something like a hack squat or a pendulum, the lower back fatigue is still going to impact your performance on any squat variation. The glute fatigue will impact your performance on squats and leg presses. Now you could argue that, okay, well, instead of training legs the day after pull, I'll just take a day off in between pull and legs. That's totally legit, but now you have extended your microcycle to 5 days, all to accommodate one lift. That doesn't make a lot of sense unless that lift is literally your number one priority. Then you could also say, well, I'll just switch leg day and pull day so my split is push, legs, pull. Okay, that can also work, but now you've deprioritized back in favor of legs, especially doing anything the day after legs. Legs is a high systemic fatigue workout. So you would only want to do that if legs, particularly quads, adductors, etc., are a bigger priority than back. And in so doing, now you're going to be deadlifting with tired quads, tired glutes, and potentially tired hamstrings if you do hamstrings on leg day. So my suggestion here is just really simple. Have 2 different leg days. Have an A rotation and a B rotation. On your A rotation, prioritize a squat variation of some kind, hack, pendulum, safety bar, whatever. And then on your B leg day, prioritize a hinge, right? So a conventional, a stiff leg, an RDL, whatever the case may be. Now you're only doing it once a week, which is about the right frequency for hinges anyway. Again, if quads and adductors are a bigger priority, then you can simply do your hinges last on your leg days. So to me, it just makes more sense to stack lifts that train the same muscles. And RDL, SLDL, conventional deadlift, yes, it trains the lower back really hard, but it's primarily a hip extension movement. And hip extension is done by the glutes with the help of the hamstrings. It is a lower body leg movement, not a back movement primarily. In my opinion, the fatigue management is just better with deadlifts on leg day. All right, everybody, you know the drill. It's the end of the video, which means, number 1, a dog meme. Number 2, if you like the video, like the video. Number 3, comment below if you have any questions or comments. 4, subscribe if you haven't already. 5, have a good day.